Yo, what's up? Hey, I want to do this video real quick. I don't know if it's gonna be a quick video. I got some things on my mind, just been thinking about. I really should have wrote things down so it could be more clear and concise. The things I'm going to say. I'm kind of shooting off the top of my head, but basically, I want to talk about, one about the Breonna Taylor case. Not so much about the facts of the case, but the whole ideal of how we perceive things and how things are presented to us. One thing I'm not understanding, one thing I'm not getting, one thing I'm not seeing is the racial aspect in this tragedy. I'm not seeing it. Now, I understand people have this idea of systemic racism, and it's not that I don't believe systemic racism exists, but I believe it's something that's overplayed, and people have a self-serving view of it. One example, when it comes to the whole war on drugs, which seems to have targeted the black community. In some ways, it has. But my thing about that, though, was it positive or negative, the war on drugs? Now, some people, it's a resounding, yes, it was negative. I personally don't agree with that. I thought it was a good thing to try to get the drugs off the streets. I remember when the drug trade was really big and bad in the 80s, in the early 90s. That's what I mean by the whole systemic racism issue being the way people look at it is self-serving. Because what people don't realize is that the black community wanted the drugs off the streets. They wanted the drug dealers off the streets. They wanted a crackdown on drugs. We wanted that. The good black people in the community wanted, the ones that actually lived in the community and were the good people, that hated having to deal with drug dealers on their block, drug dealers, on the corner, going into the store, have to worry about catching bullets because drug dealers there, seeing the same drug dealer that just got arrested back on the streets, selling some more drugs. People got tired of that. People wanted to crack down. I remember that because I was there. That's the issue. And that's the thing, So in this systemic argument, the people that wanted it wasn't just the white oppressors. It was the good black people. It was the good black folks in the community. See, at that time, you had this dichotomy in the black community. Right now, we got something else. I don't really understand it right now. But I do understand what's going on now. Because sometimes it's just like this, where you got a crazy family member. I know some of you may have family members that are bipolar. I'm sorry for using that word crazy. That might offend some people. But you have some people that are bipolar. So when they're nice, a lot of times these bipolar people, when they're nice, you forget about how bad they could be. You forget about how evil this person could be. This person could be so good, but then this person turns so evil. But when they're good, you forget about it. So it seems to me with the black community, even though we still have higher crime rates than other communities by a long shot, it actually got cut in half. If that, you might say it might have been cut in 2/3. It used to be so bad, but it got better. So it got better to a point where a lot of people have forgotten what it was like before they really start cracking down on drugs in our community. It was horrible. It was a bloodbath in the cities. And what people don't realize about the whole crime thing, reality is, when you want to blame the system or us being in poverty and all that stuff. And some of that stuff is true, but there comes a point where we have to move past that and understand that we have opportunities. And for the most part, the people who fail now in our communities is not because of a lack of opportunities. It's because they're not taking advantage of their opportunities. But like I said, it's a self-serving argument to talk about systemic racism because we deny our part that we play in it. Okay, we deny the part that the actual crime rates play in the attempt to get them down because they're so high. Let's bring them down. How do you do that? By increasing the law enforcement. That's just the way it works. That's how it's going to always work. It will always work that way. When the crime goes high, the enforcement will get harder. So that's how that works. It always works that way. And until we can show that we can step back and the crime rate stay down, it's gonna continue to do that way. That's what's going on right now. So, but like I said, with this Breonna Taylor case, people are claiming that they're making it a racial thing, and like I said, I don't get it. I don't understand why we got these laws and we got these people that are dealing in drugs, and not only were they dealing in drugs, they were associated with somebody that got murdered, more than likely because of his dealing in drugs. And that's why Breonna Taylor and the people that she deal with, or her ex-boyfriend, who is a known drug dealer, that's why they got on the radar of the police. It wasn't because they were black. It wasn't simply because they were black. It's because of the crime that was being committed by these people. And Breonna Taylor was associated with them. Not just mildly associated with them. She was the girlfriend. She dated one of the drug dealers for about 4 months at least. And even after they broke up and he went to jail and things, she would bail him out. All that stuff, she was still associated with him. They have, there's reports on the internet, and it could be false, but I read these reports. I read them probably like a week or two ago, and just seeing how just the verbiage, unless somebody has like a degree in ghettoology, they got like a professor, they're a professor of ghettoology, they got a PhD, and they've been studying it for 50 years. It's hard for me to believe that somebody sat down and wrote that stuff out. Because the way the people are talking in these recordings, this the way we talk. This how we talk to each other. It's hard to believe that this is not true. But and so anyway, Breonna Taylor has been being surveilled by the cops for years because of her association with this guy. The whole group has been being surveilled for years. So when you look at this as if this happened because of systemic racism or because she's black, I mean, if you're going to say that the very act of a police officer surveilling a black person is because of racism, then hey, you have an invincible argument that cannot be defeated. I cannot argue with that. That's an impossible thing to refute, because you've decided that anything that's done by the law is systemic racism, even if it makes sense for the law to do it. It makes sense for the law to surveil people who deal in these type of things and have been associated with murders and things. That makes sense. But because slave catchers supposedly were the beginning of police officers, which I don't understand that logic. When before you had police officers, you had soldiers. Soldiers did make the same thing police officers did. Okay, you had prisons before then. You always had labor. You always had labor as a way to punish crime. It's not something that started with the 13th Amendment. That's just something that they were able to abuse, but that did not start this. But if you want to say, because slave catchers was the model that police were made off of, therefore everything about the police is slave, the whole system is systemically racist because of that. Hey man, like I said, I can't argue with that. Even though they in the northern cities, they had police officers too, not for slavery reasons, but to control, because you had the population growing and the cities growing and wealth growing so much that crime was growing a lot. So they brought in police, and they based the police off of not the slave catchers, but off of what was going on in Britain already with their police officers. But anyway, I digress. But this is the thing about the whole, if you got that logic, so the problem with this, and this is the biggest problem with this 1619, this Black Lives Matter movement, this idea that the way the country started means everything is tainted by it, therefore it has no worth. No matter how the police started, no matter how you want to see it, we as citizens, as people who want law and order, value what the police officers do, and we don't want to get rid of them. I want police officers. I want people that are recognizable in the community to enforce the law. Okay, that's basically what a police officer does. I want people that have the authority to arrest people. We could get rid of the police, but you know what's going to happen? It's going to be like the Wild Wild West. Then you're going to have basically what you had going on in the streets with the gangs and then people taking the law in their own hands. And you're going to be mad about that. What is your solution? You don't have a real solution to get around that. But anyway, just to get back to this whole thing about Breonna Taylor, this inability or this susceptibility to falling into a bias, a way of thinking that's based off your bias, it's gotta stop. There's no reason for you as a black woman to look at this, what happened to Breonna Taylor, and say, you know, they don't care. I mean, this is about, to see this as something that happened to her because she's a black woman. There's absolutely no reason for you to think that. This didn't happen to her because she was a black woman. This happened to her because she was dealing with somebody who was a drug dealer. That put her on the radar of the police. And she didn't get killed because the police officers targeted her. A police officer got shot. And the police officer returned fire. And this is what I wish we would start doing. When we look at these cases, first off, don't jump to conclusion. Don't assume. And this is one of the problems I got with it too. The real reason you're really mad is because you perceive it to be racial. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't be that mad. Because, I mean, if somebody put a meme up with, I think, a Cameron on it. I think it's Cameron on it, and say, niggas get killed every day, B. But when a white person kills a black person, then all of a sudden, Black Lives Matter. So, what I mean by that is to say this. Not that it's not important, it is. But the reason why you really mad is because your bias has been engaged. Your bias. So, and when these stories are given to you, they are given to you to engage your bias, and that's why they present it to you in a racial way. But the only way you see this in a racial way is because of bias. There's no reason to see that a police officer gets shot by somebody, he returns fire, and a female standing right next to the person that shot the gun gets killed, and you want to throw the police officer in jail for murder. It's not going to happen. That never happens. That don't happen with white people. That's what people don't understand. When people make these, have this logic that this happened or people don't care because she's black, blah, blah, this and that. When it happened to white people, the police officer gets off. And I wish we would actually look at the law and see why these things happen rather than assuming they're happening because of race. Because 9 times out of 10, they are not happening because of race. I see people using like really bad comparisons. There's another meme going around and it's weird because people, first of all, when you have police, when you got 2 different sets of police officers in 2 different situations, you can't compare the 2 never ever because they're not the same. Because you don't have the same people. The police officers are not a monolithic group of people that all have the same brain, that all react the same way to the same stimuli. Nobody does that. But we always present that like people up here comparing a woman who called the cops and walked up to a police car and the police officer turns around and shoots her, to a female that is being investigated for dealing with a drug dealer, and a raid happens at her house. Her boyfriend shoots, they shoot back, and it hits her. And people are comparing these 2 situations like they're remotely the same. They are not. There's different situations. It's a totally different thing. But because of your bias and you want to make it, you want to see it in a racial sense. You want to feel like it's injustice because of a racial injustice. Not because a human being lost their life, but because it's racial. You want to see it as a racial injustice, and it's because you are biased. But you've been told that it's okay for you to be biased because black people can't be racist. You can't be that. No. Everyone has biases. Your biases can influence the way you interpret a situation. And normally your bias works against the facts. Meaning, depending on how powerful or how strong is your ability to be objective is whether or not the facts can overcome your bias. So like I said, we all have biases, but everybody has a different level on how much their bias controls them. And I'm finding out, and this is something I found out a long time ago, and it's something I'm speaking against, and this is why I do what I do. I don't argue against this stuff to make people mad. I know I'm gonna make people mad, but I don't do it to make you mad. I do it to get you to think, because I understand something. It's something I've seen it my whole life, being a black man, living in a black community, that once somebody or anybody makes something racial, we actually stop thinking. We stop thinking and we controlled by this idea that it's racial. It's become controlling, and by this understanding that we are easily controlled by this, we are easily manipulated and by the media, because they always present these things in these terms, even though they have and this is the bad thing, they always have the information. They have the information. They don't let it out. That will make you not look at it from a racial standpoint, but they don't do that. But so anyway, in the Breonna Taylor case, quite simple. There's no court in the land, in the United States of America, that is going to convict a police officer for shooting after he's been shot at. And now, let me get you to this. There's no court in this country that's going to convict another police officer for shooting at somebody that was shooting at their partner. It's not gonna happen. So that's not racism. That's not racial. That's not them. They don't care about Breonna Taylor's life. It's just the unfortunate reality of the situation. The police officer got shot. They returned fire, and she was standing right next to him, or she must have been standing in front of him. But in that situation, in a life or death situation, anybody that is an honest person understands why the police officer fired. Now, I'm going to say the flip thing too. I think an honest person can understand why the boyfriend fired. Okay? So, I look at this situation as he felt threatened, they felt threatened. He felt he was protecting himself. They felt they was doing a raid. They was doing their job. And okay, we raiding this house that's for drugs. Now we got these people that's dealing with drugs shooting at us. Now they go into survival mode. And that's the thing. One thing I learned, and I wish people would do this, I don't see what's wrong with this, I don't know why people won't do this, and this is part of the problem in these situations. And this is why we don't understand why these police keep getting off. One thing we don't do, we don't look at police officers as being human beings first. They're human. They're going to react to certain situations as humans do. And in those situations, if they react the way that's reasonable, not just for a human to react, but for a police officer to act, that's how the law works. They don't get tried for that. They don't get indicted for that. If that's what they asked. Was it a reasonable thing for this person to do that? And that's why the other guy got charged, because he went into a window and started shooting into the window. They felt like that was an unreasonable, very reckless thing to do. So, like I said, I don't know. The boyfriend said that they didn't announce themselves. They said they did. Apparently, there's one witness that said they did, and people are gonna say, well, most people say they didn't, but it's not. It's when it comes to trying a case, it's going to be reasonable doubt or not. They got one person. That's all they need to say. That's bad. You might say that's bad, but that one person might have actually hurt him. The boyfriend might not be telling the truth. I don't know. He seemed truthful, but I've seen situations like this before, especially when you get. And like I said, I'm from the hood. I'm not a hood person, but I'm from the hood. And I know how it is in the hood. You can get a lot of people that are not going to tell the truth, just because they still feel that she was victimized. So, or they might not have heard it. It's possible. I gotta read it again. It's possible the police officers said police while they were asleep. And when they hit the door and woke them up, they did. So it's possible the neighbor that heard that part. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying, a lot of times we have incomplete pictures of things and we don't really know what happened. Then when everything come out, you be like, oh. There's too many times that happened. You know, but anyway, so my point is this. We got to stop being controlled by our bias. Your bias don't really matter. It don't matter in the court of law. Your bias don't matter, and it shouldn't. And that's and this is the, I keep saying it, but this is the biggest flaw, and this is why I say to people, the Black Lives Matter movement, and people who think this way, why you are wrong, and what's wrong with your way of thinking. The biggest problem is not that you believe that this was racial, not that you have that bias. But the biggest problem that makes, and you don't really see it, the biggest thing about how you see things that's immoral is that you demand other people to pick up your bias. You're demanding other people to pick up their bias to prove that they love you, pick up your bias to prove that they are moral. Everyone shouldn't have to look at this racially just because you do. And the fact that this Black Lives Matter movement and the people that's pushing this critical race theory logic are really trying to get everyone on the same boat and thinking where they all think with the same bias. As a black man, you know, well, I'm a brown man. I'm brown, but, you know, we are considered black. People call us black. But as a black man, I've learned that normally we are wrong because we approach these things in our bias. And our bias controls the way we interpret it. And this is the bad, and there's another bad part about it. And we won't allow any amount of factual evidence to move us away from it. As a people, as a group, we get even stronger in it. It's crazy. You know, and all this stuff, and the way this stuff is presented to us, is so formulatic. It's a formula. I know I ain't saying that right. It's a formula that they continue to do every time. They say, unarmed black man shot by white cop, or Mr. Jones, who is black, was shot by Mr. Ferguson, who was white. As if that is important. They're playing to your bias because they know that if they do that, you're going to take it that way. So, a guy could be, the police could be called on a guy. The guy could have a knife. The guy could be resisting arrest. The guy could take 2 tasers. The guy could do something dangerous, like go into his car when a police officer tells him not to. You guys haven't seen those police training videos where the police officer allows a guy who he's trying to arrest to go back in his car, he pulls a gun out and shoot him? That's why they're not supposed to even allow you to get to that point. Once you get to that point, they got the right to shoot you. That's been established a long time ago. But you think it happened because of race, because you'll see somebody that's white, it don't happen to. It don't always happen to the black people. Because, you know why? Because you have different police officers. Some police officers don't want to pull that trigger to the point where they're scared. Some police officers are scared to pull the trigger. Some police officers don't shoot when they're supposed to shoot because they're scared, or some of them have more care for the citizen than they own for their own life. But in America, we do not require our police officers to die for citizens that are committing crimes. We just don't. We don't do that. So basically, what I mean is this, and it's a strange one for me. We got to a point where people don't understand that like knives and stuff are like deadly weapons, or a guy with a baseball bat. A baseball bat is a deadly weapon. And everyone seems to think being armed means you must have a gun. If you don't, a knife can kill you, or it can do great bodily damage. So somebody coming at you with a knife and you shoot them, that's self-defense. All right? So we had this idea that police officers are supposed to care about this individual that's actually, when a person pulls out a knife and lunge at somebody, they're the same as a person that pulls out a gun, points it and shoots. They're attempting to kill you. It's the same thing. It's the same emotion. It's the same intent. So you look at these things like it's not a big deal that somebody got a knife because you think they could be easily disarmed. They can be disarmed, but you know what happens? People end up getting stabbed, and they might die, or they might be injured a lot. So anyway, my point is this: we need to look at things from the standpoint. First of all, you gotta look at the laws. If you got a law that's that's unjust, we should. You got a law that's unjust, or we feel it's unjust. We should make the attempt to change the law. Now, when you look at this no-knock warrant stuff, there's a lot of people against that. Me, I'm against. I say I'm against it to a certain. I don't know, because my thing is I understand why they have them, because you're trying to prove a case. You try to do a raid and you give them time to get rid of stuff. It doesn't mean they won't be able to get rid of it. Even if you don't know, they still might get rid of it. But of course, I think, common sense lets you know that if you got less time to do something, you got less time to do it, right? So, but it's dangerous. It's a dangerous situation. Now, in this case, they definitely knocked. They knocked before they came in with the battering ram. It's something that's established that both sides agree to. But if we want to have that discussion, I think that's a good discussion. I think in St. Louis, they banned them. They're looking to ban them statewide. I think Rand Paul is trying to get it banned nationwide. So that is maybe a good thing that comes out of this. But the thing about when you have laws, you cannot punish somebody for doing things under the law, before you pass a law that, what I'm saying? You can't, they do a no-knock warrant, you cannot punish them for doing that because of what happened. So that's what happened in the Breonna Taylor case. The law itself is on the side of the cops in this situation. Now, the only thing it could be is if the cops, I think they're trying to say it's something on the warrant that may not be true, which could be a caveat. But even with that, if the police officers that were doing a search or were not privy to it being false, they cannot be held responsible for that. So that's what happened. So what really happened was, it was an unfortunate, bad situation, but it had nothing to do with systemic racism. It's just, that's just a bad argument now, because you can use that for everything. It's just, anything you use for everything is not a real argument. All right, so that means any type of abuse could be blamed on systemic racism. When abuse has happened because of sin, abuses be happening because of corrupt individuals, and you have corrupt individuals in every single system that the entire world has ever had for the history of mankind. If we were still back in Africa, we would be suffering some type of corruption from some type of government. You would still have problems in the system because you have people who are corrupt. So to call that racism, that's the thing. We calling stuff racism now that isn't racism. Okay? So anyway, that was my long 30-minute rant off the top of my head. So if I said something wrong or love the word, don't make a big deal about it. If I said to say this, there was nothing racial to this. I understand why, as a female, you feel like you're supposed to see this as you. The only reason you do is because they present these pictures and they make it like it's racial and make it like the reason why they got off because they don't care about black lives. No. It's because of how police officers are protected in our government system, in our system, in our laws. And there's reasons for that. You have to look at those reasons, and you have to make a decision, do we really want to change this? That's where the change has to come. The way the law goes now is basically this. If a police officer, whatever he does based on the information he has, reacts in a way that is reasonable for a police officer, a normal police officer in that situation to do, they do not hold the police officer culpable. That's how it goes. So if we want to change that, we have to change that, and then the stuff will start changing. But we don't want to have a system where we automatically throw cops in jail when they do things that any human being in that situation probably would do. We do not want that. We do not want to make a biased system that favors criminals. That's not what we want, especially in a time when we got a country where, I'm sorry to say it, we have a whole lot of criminals. And the biggest problem, in our community, the black community itself, is the criminality, black criminality, the way we prop up criminals in our community. And the reality is, that's part of the reason why Brianna isn't here today, because she associated with a criminal extensively. Now, if we shun the criminals of the community like we shun people like myself, the Uncle Toms and the Coons, if we treated our criminals that way, we would have a lot less problem with the police.